Your romantic life is not a series of random encounters. It is a script. You are the lead actor, but you did not write the original draft. Today, we find the author and begin the rewrite. We begin not with blame, nor with regret, but with a quiet and courageous curiosity. We are here to explore one of the most profound and often painful mysteries of the human heart, the tendency to repeat the same relationship patterns, to fall for the same type of person, to have the same arguments, and to arrive at the same disappointing conclusions time and time again. It is a feeling of déjà vu so powerful it can feel like a curse, a romantic fatalism that whispers you are destined to fail in love. You might look across the table at a new partner and feel a chill of recognition as they utter a phrase that echoes your ex, or display a habit that you swore you would never tolerate again. The initial thrill of the new connection fades, replaced by a sinking, familiar dread. It is the feeling of being trapped in a play where the scenery and the actors change, but the plot remains stubbornly, painfully the same. This experience is not a failing of character, nor is it simple bad luck. It is the expression of a deep psychological principle, a force operating beneath the surface of our conscious awareness. It is a mechanism that prioritizes the familiar over the fulfilling, the known over the new. Today, we will give this force a name. We will trace its origins, and we will illuminate the path toward reclaiming authorship of your own love story. We will turn on the lights and examine the plans of the unseen architecture that shapes your connections. The journey begins with acknowledging the pattern itself. The pattern is the ghost in the machine of our relationships. It is the recurring theme, the unresolved chord that plays in the background of our romantic lives. For some, the pattern is one of attraction to emotionally unavailable partners. There is an initial chase, a captivating challenge, but it always culminates in a lonely partnership where true intimacy remains just out of reach. You feel alive in the pursuit, but once the connection is established, a subtle distance emerges. Texts go unanswered for hours, then days. Plans are vague. Conversations about the future are skillfully deflected. You find yourself working harder and harder for scraps of attention, convincing yourself that their emotional distance is a sign of depth or complexity, when in reality it is simply a reflection of a pattern you are drawn to. For others, it is a pattern of attracting partners who need saving, individuals wrestling with addiction, financial instability, or emotional turmoil. The relationship becomes a project, a rescue mission, where one's own needs are perpetually deferred. The rescuer feels noble and necessary until the weight of the other's problems becomes crushing and the relationship collapses under the strain. You become a therapist, a financial planner, and a cheerleader, but you cease to be a partner. Your identity becomes so enmeshed with their problems that you lose sight of your own desires and dreams. Still another pattern involves a cycle of intense passion followed by explosive conflict. The highs are intoxicating, the lows are devastating. The relationship feels alive, vibrant with drama, but it lacks the quiet stability of genuine security. Peace feels boring, and stability is mistaken for stagnation. You mistake the adrenaline of the fight and the dopamine rush of the makeup sex for genuine passion. You tell yourself that this intensity is proof of your deep connection, but it is often a sign of deep instability. These are just a few examples. Your pattern may be unique in its details, but it is universal in its nature. It is a reenactment.
To understand this reenactment, we must turn to the work of Sigmund Freud, an architect of modern psychology. Freud observed in his patients, particularly those who had experienced trauma, like soldiers returning from war, a strange and powerful compulsion to repeat painful experiences. He saw men plagued by nightmares that forced them to relive the horrors of the battlefield. This baffled him. It flew in the face of his earlier theories about the pleasure principle, the idea that humans are fundamentally driven to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Why would the mind force someone to relive their worst moments? He called this the repetition compulsion. He theorized that this was a drive that existed beyond the pleasure principle. The psyche was not seeking happiness in these repetitions, it was seeking mastery. The unconscious mind, in its timeless and symbolic way, attempts to return to the scene of an original wound, not to suffer again, but to somehow change the outcome, to finally win a game that was lost long ago. It is an attempt to resolve an unresolved past by restaging it in the present. Your unconscious does not know that your new partner is not your emotionally distant father or your critical mother. It only recognizes a familiar emotional dynamic, an opportunity to finally get the love, approval, or safety that was once denied. This is the core of the diagnosis. Your relationship patterns are not random. They are subconscious attempts at healing. This drive for mastery is powerful, but it is also tragically flawed because the present can never truly be the past. The new person in your life is merely a stand-in, an actor cast in a role they do not even know they are playing. The script they are handed is invisible, written in the language of your earliest experiences. This brings us to the source of the script itself, the unconscious relationship blueprint. Imagine that when you were born, you were given a set of architectural plans for building relationships. You did not design these plans. They were drafted for you based on your earliest interactions with your primary caregivers. This blueprint is what modern psychologists, following the work of John Bowlby, call our internal working model. It is a set of core beliefs about yourself, about others, and about how relationships work. If your caregivers were consistently warm, responsive, and attuned to your needs, you likely developed a secure blueprint. This blueprint says, I am worthy of love, others are trustworthy and reliable, and intimacy is a safe and wonderful thing. A person with a secure blueprint enters the world of relationships with a foundation of trust and self-worth. They are able to give and receive love without excessive fear of abandonment or engulfment. They can handle conflict constructively and navigate the natural ups and downs of a partnership. They expect good things from connection, and they are generally able to create it.
However, for many, the early environment was not so consistently nurturing. If a caregiver was inconsistent, sometimes available and loving, but other times distant or overwhelmed, a child might develop an anxious attachment style. The blueprint in this case is filled with uncertainty. It says, I must work hard to keep love. I must monitor my partner for signs of abandonment, and I am always in danger of being left. A person with this blueprint often experiences relationships as a roller coaster of anxiety and relief. They may be called clingy or needy, but these behaviors are simply the logical expression of their internal working model. In adulthood, this can manifest as needing constant reassurance, reading deeply into a partner's mood shifts, or feeling intense anxiety when a text message is not returned promptly. Their emotional thermostat is highly sensitive to any perceived threat of disconnection, because their blueprint tells them that connection is fragile and can be lost at any moment. They are strategies to maintain connection in a world that feels fundamentally insecure. On the other hand, if a caregiver was consistently distant, rejecting, or dismissive of a child's needs, an avoidant attachment style might form. This blueprint is one of self-reliance. It says, I must take care of myself. Others are unreliable and intrusive, and true intimacy is a threat to my independence. A person with this blueprint often keeps partners at an emotional distance. They may value their freedom above all else and feel suffocated by too much closeness. When a partner gets too close or makes emotional demands, the avoidant person feels an overwhelming urge to pull away, to create space. They might use work, hobbies, or intellectualism as a way to avoid deep emotional engagement. They are not unfeeling, they are simply operating from a blueprint that taught them that emotional vulnerability is dangerous and that self-sufficiency is the only true safety. There is also a fourth style, disorganized attachment, often stemming from a childhood environment that was frightening or chaotic. The caregiver was a source of both comfort and fear. The resulting blueprint is a confusing mix of anxious and avoidant strategies. The person simultaneously craves and fears intimacy. They may push partners away and then desperately try to pull them back, creating relationships marked by volatility and confusion. These blueprints, formed before we had words to describe them, become the invisible architecture of our adult relationships. We are not consciously aware of them, yet we use them to build everything. We unconsciously seek out partners and dynamics that fit our plans. This is why the anxious and avoidant styles are so often drawn to each other in a painful magnetic dance. A person with an anxious blueprint might find the emotional distance of an avoidant partner strangely familiar, even compelling. The dynamic of pursuit and withdrawal feels like love because it matches the original design, where love was inconsistent and had to be earned. A person with an avoidant blueprint might be drawn to an anxious partner whose demands for closeness confirm their core belief that intimacy is engulfing and threatening. The repetition compulsion ensures that we keep building the same house over and over again because it is the only design we know. We mistake the feeling of familiarity for the feeling of love. This confusion is not just psychological, it is neurological. Our brains are wired to prefer the known, which leads us to the familiarity engine. The human brain is a marvel of efficiency. It creates strong neural pathways for thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are repeated over time. Think of these pathways as well-traveled roads through a dense forest. The first time you experience an emotion or a situation, you are cutting a new path with a machete. It is slow and difficult.
But each time you repeat that experience, the path gets wider, smoother, and easier to travel. Eventually, it becomes a superhighway. Your brain, seeking to conserve energy, will almost always choose the superhighway, even if it leads to a place of pain. If your childhood was marked by emotional neglect, the neural pathways for loneliness and self-reliance are wide and paved. If your upbringing was chaotic and filled with conflict, the pathways for adrenaline, cortisol, and high drama are the brain's default route. An unfamiliar dynamic, such as a healthy, secure relationship, is like venturing into the dense, uncharted forest. It feels uncomfortable, uncertain, and even dangerous to the brain. The brain's primary directive is survival, not happiness. From a survival perspective, a known negative is often perceived as safer than an unknown positive. The familiar pain of a rejecting partner, for example, is a known quantity. Your nervous system has developed coping mechanisms for it. You know how to survive that particular brand of suffering. The consistent availability and emotional attunement of a secure partner, however, can be deeply unsettling for a nervous system wired for chaos or neglect. It can feel boring, or worse, it can feel like a trap. You might find yourself waiting for the other shoe to drop, unable to trust the goodness of the experience. You might even unconsciously sabotage the relationship to return to a more familiar emotional state. This is the familiarity engine at work. It creates a powerful biological pull toward the emotional climates of our past. The chemistry we feel, that intense spark that feels like you cannot live without them, is often not a sign of a healthy connection. It is frequently the spark of recognition. The unconscious mind is shouting, "This is it. This is the dynamic where we can finally fix the past." This intense attraction is the engine of the repetition compulsion, propelling us back into the very scenarios we consciously wish to avoid. It is a biological addiction to a familiar emotional state. Breaking the cycle requires us to become willing to tolerate the profound discomfort of the new, to choose the uncharted path through the forest over the familiar paved road to disappointment. This requires understanding the deeper purpose behind our choices, what we can call the unconscious mission. As we have seen, the psyche is not trying to cause us pain, it is trying to heal. Imago relationship therapy, developed by Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt, offers a powerful framework for understanding this mission. The theory suggests that we unconsciously seek out partners who carry both the positive and negative traits of our primary caregivers. This composite figure is our imago, the Latin word for image. We fall in love with someone who feels familiar, someone who represents our unfinished business from childhood. The unconscious mission is to get this imago partner to finally give us the love, validation, or security we did not receive as children, thereby healing the original wound. Let us consider the concrete scenario of a character we will call Alex. Alex has a pattern of being drawn to partners who are projects, people they feel they can fix. This might be a partner with an addiction, a struggling artist with no stable income, or someone with deep emotional wounds. Alex is a natural rescuer. They are compassionate, giving, and endlessly patient. On the surface, this seems noble, but the relationships always end the same way. Alex becomes exhausted, resentful, and feels utterly unappreciated. The partner either resents being a project or never truly changes, leaving Alex depleted and heartbroken. If we look at Alex's unconscious blueprint, we might find that Alex grew up with a parent who was depressed or volatile. As a child, Alex had to become a little adult, learning to manage the parents' moods, to be the responsible one, to put their own needs aside to maintain a fragile peace in the household. Alex's childhood was a rescue mission, one that was impossible for a child to succeed at. Now, as an adult, Alex's repetition compulsion drives them to find partners who allow them to reenact this role. The unconscious mission is to finally succeed, to finally save someone, and in doing so, to retroactively heal the part of them that felt so helpless and responsible as a child. Alex is not consciously aware of this. They consciously believe they are just a caring person who happens to fall for people in need.
But the pattern reveals the mission. Now consider another character, Maria. Maria's pattern is attracting highly critical and demanding partners. She is a high achiever, always striving for perfection, yet she constantly feels like she is falling short in her relationships. Her partners often criticize her choices, her friends, or even the way she loads the dishwasher. She finds herself walking on eggshells, desperate to please them and win their approval. Looking at Maria's blueprint, we discover she grew up with a father who was a perfectionist and rarely gave praise.
His love felt conditional, tied to her achievements. She learned early on that to be loved, she had to be perfect. As an adult, she is unconsciously drawn to partners who mirror this dynamic. The intense chemistry she feels for a critical partner is the recognition of her oldest wound. Her unconscious mission is to finally be good enough for this person, to finally earn the unconditional approval she never received from her father. The tragedy for both Alex and Maria is that the mission is always doomed to fail. The new partner is not the parent. Even if the partner does change, it cannot heal the original wound. The healing cannot come from an external source. It must come from Alex turning inward, from grieving the childhood they lost, and from learning to parent the part of themselves that is still trying to be a hero. It must come from Maria realizing that her worth is not dependent on anyone's approval and learning to give that validation to herself. This mission is often complicated by another psychological force, the projection of our own disowned self, which brings us to the concept of the shadow partner. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung gave us the concept of the shadow. The shadow is the part of our unconscious mind that contains all the traits and impulses that our conscious ego has rejected or repressed. These are the parts of ourselves that we believe are unacceptable: the anger, the jealousy, the vulnerability, the greed, the laziness, the ambition. Because we cannot bear to see these traits in ourselves, we do something remarkable. We project them onto others.
Our romantic partners, because of the intimacy and intensity of the connection, become the primary screen for our shadow projections. The very thing that infuriates you most about your partner is often a disowned part of your own shadow. For example, if you pride yourself on being strong and independent, you might be intensely irritated by your partner's perceived neediness or vulnerability. This irritation is a clue. It may be pointing to your own repressed vulnerability, your own unmet needs for support that you have deemed unacceptable. Your partner's behavior forces you to confront a part of yourself you have banished to the shadow. You see their vulnerability as weakness because you have judged that same vulnerability within yourself as a weakness you cannot afford to show. Conversely, if you see yourself as a laid-back and easygoing person, you might be constantly agitated by your partner's ambition and drive. You might label them a workaholic or as being overly controlling. This judgment could be a projection of your own disowned ambition, a part of you that longs to achieve more but is held back by a fear of failure or a belief that being ambitious is somehow bad or selfish. Their drive reminds you of a potential within yourself that you have chosen not to activate, and that reminder is uncomfortable. The relationship then becomes a battleground, but the war is not truly with the other person. It is an externalized battle with our own inner shadow. We try to control or change our partner when we are really trying to control or change the parts of ourselves we cannot accept. Jung believed that this was one of the profound purposes of relationship, to make us conscious of our shadow. The conflict with our partner is a painful but necessary invitation to wholeness. To heal the relationship, we must be willing to withdraw our projections and own our shadow. This means asking, what is it in me that is so triggered by this behavior? How is my partner showing me a part of myself that I have refused to look at? This work is difficult. It requires immense self-honesty.
But it is also the path to a much deeper and more authentic connection, both with our partner and with ourselves. We move from seeing our partner as the problem to seeing the dynamic as a mirror for our own inner work. So we have explored the pattern, the diagnosis, the blueprint, the neurology, the mission, and the shadow. The question that remains is how we begin to change. How do we take this knowledge and turn it into wisdom? How do we begin the rewrite of our own script? The process of change is not about finding the perfect partner. It is about becoming a more conscious person. The first and most crucial step is developing self-awareness. We cannot change a pattern we cannot see. This is where we can introduce an immediate practical checkpoint, an exercise we will call the pattern journal. For 1 week, your only task is to observe your interactions without judgment. At the end of each day, write down one interaction with a partner, a friend, or even a stranger that felt emotionally charged. It could be a moment of irritation, anxiety, sadness, or even intense attraction. Next to this description, write down the first time in your life you can remember feeling that exact same emotion, regardless of the context. Do not analyze it. Do not try to find a grand meaning. Simply connect the present feeling to a past memory. A moment of feeling dismissed by your partner today might connect to a memory of being ignored by a parent at age 7. A surge of anxiety about a partner being late might connect to the feeling of waiting for a caregiver who was unreliable. The goal of this exercise is to build the neural pathway of connection between your present reactions and your past experiences. You are training your brain to see the echoes of the blueprint in your daily life. This is the foundational skill of the rewrite. As you become more aware of your blueprint, you can begin to make conscious choices rather than being driven by unconscious reactions. When you feel that intense, familiar spark of attraction, you can learn to pause. You can ask yourself, what does this person represent? What familiar dynamic is being activated here? Is this feeling leading me toward health or simply toward a familiar reenactment? This pause is where your freedom lies. In that pause, you can choose a different response. Instead of immediately leaning into the attraction, you can observe it with curiosity. Instead of reacting with anger in a conflict, you can state your feeling and ask for a moment to process. The rewrite also involves learning to tolerate the discomfort of the unknown. It means being willing to give a chance to someone who does not create that immediate dramatic spark, someone who might feel a little boring to your nervous system at first. This person, who is perhaps kind, consistent, and emotionally available, represents the uncharted forest. Being with them will require you to build new neural pathways. It will feel strange at first, but with time, safety and security can begin to feel like home. It involves grieving the past. We must grieve the love and support we did not receive in childhood. We must mourn the fact that we cannot go back and fix it. This grief allows us to release our partners from the impossible job of healing our childhood wounds. We learn to give ourselves the compassion and validation we once sought from others. We become our own good parent. This means acknowledging the pain of the past without letting it define the present. Finally, the rewrite is about shifting our relationship goals. The goal is not to find a person who completes you, but to become a whole person who is capable of sharing your life with another whole person. It is not about avoiding conflict, but about learning how to navigate it with respect and a willingness to see it as a mirror for your own growth. It is about choosing a partner based on shared values, character, and the capacity for mutual care, rather than on the intoxicating chemistry of a shared wound. This journey is not easy, and it is not quick. It is the work of a lifetime.
But it is the most rewarding work we can do. To understand the unconscious forces that shape our lives is to move from being a passenger to being the navigator. You may not have written the original draft of your script, but you hold the pen now. You have the power to write a new scene, a new chapter, and ultimately, a new ending. The patterns of the past do not have to be a life sentence. They can be a curriculum. They are the syllabus for your own deep personal growth. By studying them, by understanding them, and by treating them with compassion, you can transform the heaviest chains of your past into the very keys that unlock a future of conscious, fulfilling love.